I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capital Views. Welcome, Mike Navarre, Commissioner of Commerce and Economic Development.
Thanks, Tim. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Mike, we have always talked a lot about economic development, diversifying our economy in the state, but yet so we've always faced challenges doing that. And sometimes you wonder whether can we really afford it?
Yeah, that's a great question because we have excellent opportunities. We have resource development, a beautiful state where tourism opportunities. So we have great opportunities for economic development, but we have to recognize in that discussion about diversifying our economic base that there are costs associated, state government costs associated to providing for the services that we require as a part of that economic development. Schools, good roads, public safety, all of the things that the state does and has to pay for, but most economic development in Alaska, except for oil and gas predominantly, doesn't really have a drawback for the state to pay those costs associated. So we need to keep that in mind.
As we're talking about reforming our fiscal structure this year and perhaps adopting a broad-based tax where people would pay tax, that would partly redress that.
That would, and if you look at how we pay for the cost of government services at the local level, local governments have sales tax, property tax, or a combination of the two, whereas at the state level, when we see economic development in a lot of the sectors of our economy, we don't have any drawback on that economic activity to pay the services that go along with it. And so when I talk about the building an economic foundation, what I'm looking to try to broaden the debate to the bigger economic picture rather than just talking about taxes and talking about use of the permanent fund earnings. We need to talk about why. And that's so that we can have a good economic foundation that allows us to take advantage of those economic opportunities in the short term and in the long term. And that means that we have to contribute something back to pay the cost of services associated with economic development.
Well, let's think of an example like perhaps the Eielson Air Force Base expansion. Mm-hmm. It's a great opportunity for Fairbanks. Several thousand people moving in. Great for the community. Those people are going to go to school. The Air Force is very interested in having them live in Fairbanks, not be isolated at Eielson. So there's going to be a cost to the Fairbanks School District.
Absolutely.
All kinds of services that are going to cost money. And how will that be paid for?
Right, and that's something that, the state pays about 2/3 of the cost of education in Fairbanks. And so local government can pay for their share with the taxes that they have within their community, mostly property taxes. The state doesn't have that same draw, and so it's a negative to the state, even though it's great opportunities for the local community. And we just have to figure that out and recognize it. We still want to take advantage of those opportunities. We just have to make sure that we recognize the realities of paying the cost of those services.
Like other industries where tourism is doing very well. Mm-hmm. What kinds of industries bring in benefits but don't impose a lot of costs? I guess oil is obviously an example of a lot of revenues. I guess mines are very good for local governments.
Again, because local governments have some taxes, but the mining rents and royalties that we get at the state level are not adequate to take care of all of the direct jobs and the services to the people who take advantage or have those jobs and their families. Never mind the indirect jobs that are associated with any kind of economic development, where you see service industries and others that are built up to try to support the economic activity and economic expansion. At the local level, we have a tax structure in place. We have an economic base that allows for some of the recovery of those costs. At the state level, by and large, we do not. And so in order for us really to be as aggressive and take advantage of economic opportunities, we have to recognize the reality that we have to have a structure in place, including a broad-based tax that allows us to pay the costs associated with that development.
Yeah, and the governor has a proposed broad-based tax that would be an employment tax, a wage tax that would exist for 3 years, and it would be a step in the direction toward a broad-based tax.
Yeah, and it is a broad-based tax, and it's something that provides for infrastructure, capital projects mostly. It's something that we really since about 2014, we haven't really taken care of a lot of our infrastructure needs in a capital budget. So we're deferring a lot of maintenance on facilities, the assets that are owned by the state and local governments. We're deferring some of that maintenance, and it's going to manifest itself at some point in the future. Those costs don't go away. You can defer them for a while. It's like the old commercial, pay me now or pay me later. They're still going to come due, and right now we're ignoring a lot of those.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot to rebuild some of those facilities. I know a lot of it is concentrated at the University of Alaska and schools
School
too.
districts, yeah.
I mean, you were in Kenai recently as the mayor. What's the condition of the schools in the Kenai borough?
You know, the Kenai Borough has done really a very good job of taking care and maintaining their facilities, but we did it under state programs for construction and major maintenance, where the state reimbursed 70% of those costs. If we went out to bond, we had to pay 30% of the costs. The state would pay 70%. That program's been eliminated. And so that means that if we're going to do it, we have to pay 100% of the cost. We're paying 100% of the cost. It detracts from other things that we also want to fund, which is education and public safety in our communities. Keep in mind that as we've seen the economy contract in Alaska and the fiscal situation that the state's faced, we've already seen cuts passed down to local governments, revenue sharing cuts. Education hasn't really been cut, but the growth, I guess, in the contract values haven't been fully funded. And so we've already seen some impacts at the local level.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult time. It's something we're just going to have to work through. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Commissioner.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Thank you, and this is Tim Bradner. Thank you for joining us on Capitol Views.